With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Donovan Carter with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. It is about 1:30 p.m., August 26th, in Gainesville, Florida. We are in the lovely home of Mr. Scott Camille. And today I'm with...
Don Perdue.
Thank you so much, Mr. Perdue. Now, could you spell your name for the record?
Okay. It's Don Perdue, and it's spelled last name Perdue, like the chicken, not the university.
Gotcha. And when and where were you born, Don?
In Detroit, Michigan, in a suburb of Detroit, Highland Park.
Okay.
And that was in May 28, 1949.
Highland Park, Michigan.
And my parents, or my mother at the time, moved to Florida when I was around a year old. So I thought, until I was 12 years old, I thought I was born in Florida. Nobody had ever told me any different. And it came up when I was 12 about it, and I said, oh, yeah, you were born in Highland Park, Michigan. Oh.
I had no clue.
Yeah.
Wow. And what did your parents do?
Well, at that time, my mother she didn't work, but their husband at the time, I thought was my father, but he wasn't. He was a stepfather. But he worked in the auto industry up in Detroit, and he moved down to Florida. They bought a house in Hollywood, Florida, and she lived down there with my brother and I, we're fraternal twins. And he stayed up there working, and he'd come down a couple times a year and that, so I didn't see him very often. And up until, I guess, about 10 years old, I thought he was my real father. Maybe it was 9 years old, somewhere in there. And then in the middle of the night, we just left because there was a lot of turmoil in it. That when he did come in, he was an abusive person with her, and me too. But we went up to Massachusetts, and I never saw him again in that. But at that time, I found out he wasn't my real father, and my mother told me the whole story about my real father. And he, 2 years later, died, and I never met him or anything like that. So as far as I'm concerned, I never really had a father. So, I mean, you have a father, but not.
Right. So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your mother?
Yeah, she grew up in an orphanage in Canada, and I'm not really sure of all the details of that, but I know she's of Irish descent and French, and that's, I guess, the name Perdue. And she had it pretty hard. She didn't finish fifth grade of school. That was it. Fifth grade she went to, and then she started working. And I guess she met my father. He was my real father was in the automotive industry too in Detroit, and she married him up there. But I guess he had a real drinking problem that they ended up getting separated, and she ended up with another guy from Detroit, and he ended up being very abusive. So she didn't do well but I guess in her situation, and she had 5 children. But there was a big split between my 2 sisters and the other brother, my twin brother. Obviously we were together, but we were like separate. We never saw them until we got older, because there was 14 years difference between when she had them, the other children, and then had us. And so we ended up in Florida, and because the stepfather was so abusive, probably about 2 years before I went to Massachusetts, we left in the middle of the night type of thing, my mother sent my brother up to live with my sister that was living, my older sister that was living in Massachusetts, in Springfield at that time. And so then 2 years later, there was an episode that happened, and the court then made it pretty final. And we sort of left like in the middle of the night. I remember getting a little suitcase and a jacket, and we got on a train at like 12 o'clock at night, and the next thing I know, we were in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is a long train ride.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing about it that I remember, and if I'm getting too much off stop me, we got to the Springfield, Mass, and got off at the train station. I looked outside, and there was 6 feet of snow. And I had a little windbreaker on, jacket. it was a rude awakening to what winters in Massachusetts can be like.
Yes.
And so the next day they got me a jacket and that, but it was a big change in my life at that point.
Yes. And you said you were a child just at this time.
Yeah, 9 years old then. Yeah.
So did you finish your schooling out there?
No, didn't even stay there. Not quite a year. And well, actually, one school year, which is not a year, but we stayed the school year, one school year, and then we came back to Florida. And but things were really hard then because my mother didn't have a real education, and she waitress, and she ended up being a barmaid or tending bar, and that's what she did for a living. And then and my brother came back with us, the two of us, and we I didn't realize we struggled as much as we did. Now I look back now and and you think this kid thinks just you didn't have certain thing, whatever, but now I look back at stuff and and when I was 12, my brother and I, which was like about a year after we came back, we got paper routes, and I'd cut lawns on the weekend and that, and I mean literally we did a lot of that just to eat, and it was tight. Like there's a lot of people in this country like that, but so I'm very empathetic to people in those kind of situations trying to get ahead in that, and but I didn't do well. My mother didn't. She said you had to stay in school, but all the way up through high school, all I wanted to do was get out. I didn't care, and I got in a lot of fights in school, and now I look back, and it was probably due to the abuse of the stepfather and stuff like that, and that was actually one of the things that he had really attacked me pretty badly and hurt me, and that's why we left and went to the court. The police came and intervened and all that kind of stuff, and they just, you got to leave, and whatever for your own safety and whatever stuff like that. And I always had a thought that I'd come back day and like pummel him. And then I was about 19 or 20. I actually ran into him, and he was like this pathetic guy. But then it didn't matter, it was like it was sort of a joke at that point. But for years I thought, boy, when I see him, I'm going to get him.
Yeah.
He's got a lot to catching up on. It's just one of those funny things that you do. And but that was, and so I went through high school, but I didn't do well. I mean, I graduated, but all I want to do is get out of school, and I got suspended several times for fighting and that, which hurts too, because back then you just got kicked out of school, and I just sort of hang out, I'd be out of school for a month and nobody, said, you got to go somewhere. Now I guess they put you in alternative classes and stuff like that, which is smart. And, but back then they didn't do that. And so I didn't really think anything, and I was trying to work a number of different, but they were just like, I worked in a garage and a gas station, I worked in restaurants and stuff like that, all through high school, because at night, like people, I have friends from high school now, I still know because I live in general same area, and they go, why didn't you do this? Why? As soon as school's over, now I went to a job, and I'd work till 11 o'clock at night, and then you go home and sleep and get up next morning and go to school, and all I wanted was that money from that job, and I didn't have a car or anything like that, and stuff. I had a bicycle, and, in high school, especially now, it wasn't quite so bad then, but still, most of the guys had, the cool guys had cars and stuff, and, none of that was in the cards for me. And, I guess I just didn't find the job but, I was doing things to try and so actually, just before the last year of high school, or like the very beginning, I went to the Marine Corps to join because I had a friend that had went into the Marine Corps.
Do you remember what year this was about?
Yeah, probably 1967. So, and I went, might have been first part of 68, in that area, 67, 60, early part of 68. And I went to the recruiter in Fort Lauderdale, and he first said, "You're a little small," he said to me, because I was small. And he says, "How old are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm 16 and a half or something like that." He says, "We want Marines, but," he says, "you come back after you finish high school." And so when I finished high school, then I didn't really have any desire to, I was really didn't have any direction. I wasn't planning on going to college. I didn't think I had the money or anything to do that. And so that was the last thing in my mind. And I was just trying to find the best jobs I could. But what happens is, to me anyway, you get so tied up working to try and earn money that you don't go out and really try to find a better job. You don't want to lose the job you got because then you won't have any money. And then like a year or so later, I got go for a physical because they're doing the draft thing, and all that kind of stuff. And I went to Coral Gables. And when I was down there, they were doing something. He said, I'm not really excited about going in the Army. And one of the guys, there was a Marine guy there, and he says, oh, if you don't have to get drafted, you can come in the Marine Corps for 2 years, the same as if you got drafted in the Army. He says, yeah, well, he says it's almost like getting drafted, but you get to choose. You can go in the Marine Corps, and and of course he gave me a story about, I'm like, oh wow, well, you got me. I'm ready to go. I mean, I knew I was going somewhere, so I at least maybe give me some choice and something. This is probably going to seem really funny, but one of the biggest things in growing up, a pleasure I have, and I still like it when I'm retired, I watch more on television. At some show, certain shows I'll watch and I love movies on TV. But there was a show called The Marine, and it was about a Marine officer in Quantico. And I love that TV show. And a real good friend of mine that we went through a high school together, his name was Bill Buckles. And we used to, Friday night, we'd go over to whoever's house was, we'd go over and we'd have popcorn and we'd watch this show. And that was our big Friday night. And he was a year older than me. And as soon as he graduated, he went in the Marine Corps. And just before I went in, he got killed in Vietnam. I got word that he had been killed. So I even wanted to go more into the Marine Corps then. I thought, that in a way, I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, other than a little bit I saw in the news. There's this war going on someplace and people are getting killed and stuff. And, and I didn't really know how bad it was. And, and they really weren't demonstrating that much then on the news or whatever. I didn't really pick up on it other than, I knew there was some stuff going on in that. I didn't follow it per se. And so I thought, well, going to Marine Corps be like that looked really neat. I'd like to do that. But, he was an officer or whatever. But I said, whatever. I'd like to do this. And I had a guy that I was always told he was my uncle, but he wasn't. He'd been in the Marine Corps in Korea and went through the Chosin Reservoir and all that. And he told me stories about it. So I was like, this is, if I have to go somewhere, that's where I want to go, and I'll take my chances, whatever. And then when I got into boot camp and all that, it was...
Do you remember where that was?
Yeah, Paris Island.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, that was the first time I was ever on an airplane flying to up there. Actually, I think it was Beaufort, North Carolina, or South Carolina we flew into, and then took a bus from there. But so it was like a big shock to me. It's all new. And the funniest thing was when we were flying out of Miami on an airplane, and it was all guys going to military bases. And they said, "You're in charge to me." And I was like, that was the first time I was ever charged anybody. I was like, and, we want you to make sure everybody sits over here and gets off the plane when they're supposed to. Like, I said, oh boy, this is like a big deal, for me. I was pretty naive. And so in lots of ways, I think I grew up street smart and, type of, not gang but more like that would be, and there was gangs around it, but I didn't belong to a gang per se. But I mean, I could get along and felt comfortable in that area, but I wasn't comfortable in the other type of aspects. And boot camp was hard for me, but it wasn't. But I knew I was going to make it. And I mean, I struggled through it like anybody. But I went in. I was 120 pounds when I went in, so I was small and scrawny. And I came out of boot camp. I was 160 pounds.
Wow.
And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was 165. So I only gained 5 pounds. So I gained 40 pounds in boot camp that, period of time.
Wow.
So that was a big change. And I was what they called a skinny body when I went in. And so when you go into the cafeteria, I could put as much food as I wanted on my plate as long as I ate it all. And so, that was like paradise. I mean, all this food, I couldn't, and I thought it was the best food in the world. I mean, other people, they tell you about military food, but but I even in not high school, but elementary school, they had lunches for us and that, and I always enjoyed them, and I always wanted extra stuff in that. So this was like paradise. At least, I mean, they were browbeating us in there, and then they do abuse you somewhat, but I understand why. I mean, I don't think it was just abuse. I mean, you're going to war, and it's not going to be nice, and you need to be toughened up if you're not. I mean, and I think that was one of the things that helped me. I was tough, in a sense. I mean, I didn't like getting beaten up, but it didn't bother me or emotionally like it. I mean, some of the guys had a real hard time. And I had a guy that I knew, not real well, but from high school, he went in at the same time, and he went in, and he had a real rough time. I mean, and it just, I don't want to, but I mean, it was a lot tougher for him and that. And, just emotionally, I think, I mean, it's tough physically for all of, most of the guys. And at some point, and you get better at it and stuff and in different things and that. But a lot of that kind of stuff when they're roughing out, he just really didn't handle it well in that. And he was lucky. He ended up being a truck driver in Vietnam, and he made it through okay. So, I mean, I only saw him once the whole time I was over there, but did a lot better. And I think he was happy being a truck driver. And I sort of got off tangents. Where do you want me to just keep going on from there?
Yeah.
Okay, so you go to Paris Island, and you hear all sorts of stories, and you're like, I don't know if it's actual fear, but you're nervous, and it's a sort of a fear, like a thing you're not, and everything's so new, and you don't know what to expect, and you do whatever you do to get through in that. And I remember I got in fights with some big guys, a guy like you, he was a real bruiser, and he was pushing everybody around. But because of how I grew up, I didn't care how big whatever he was. And we got in a fight in the bathroom. It was interesting though, because some guy said, and I told you I was 120 pounds. They picked on me, and he was really picked. And I went back, and I mean, he would have killed me if it hadn't get stopped. I mean, ultimately, but I was fighting him like crazy, and the DIs came in, and we both got in trouble, over that and extra stuff, and and they punched us out saying, well, if you want to fight, we'll show you a fight and that kind of stuff. And but what happened is it changed life, and all of a sudden, it's like sort of when you see in the movies if you stand up to a bully or something like that. But he was an interesting story because he was a big, he could do a lot of strong stuff in that. But at the end of boot camp, he was like, all of a sudden he disappeared. He went AWOL. He took off. He decided, and I didn't hear anything for a while, and then I guess it was like, and we were at another camp. Then we were at, we went up to North Carolina to the Camp Pendleton, not Pendleton, that's in California, Camp Lejeune, Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, and for advanced training and stuff like that. And all of a sudden they come in one day and they said, "You hear all about what's his name?" "Oh, what happened?" "Oh, he got arrested for murder down in Dania, Florida." And Dania's right next to Hollywood where I lived, he'd killed some guy on the beach, and they were, I guess he went to prison for life. That's the last I heard.
Wow.
So I thought, wow, that's I hated to see. In a way, I didn't really like the guy, but it was sort of a, you have a bond. I mean, there's sort of like this kind of thing, even though you fight and stuff in it, there's sort of like, God, I knew that guy. And I just think he had a real problem with authority in that, and just whatever. And it turned out, I found out then at that, because we read the paper and it told, because in boot camp, you really don't know anything about anybody. They don't, you can't really tell stuff. And after you get out, at the end of boot camp, you can talk and all that kind of, but they want you to not bring any, home life, any kind of, less information you know about anything, the better off they like it. And he had been a boxer, an amateur boxer, and all this kind of stuff and that. But he had stabbed a guy to death on the beach. I guess I don't know, we had an argument, it was going to rob him. They weren't clear in the paper at that. Maybe I don't remember it exactly right. But anyway, he killed the guy, and they arrested him, and he was on trial. And that's how it was in the newspaper that we read it, because it was a big article, and somebody brought a Florida paper or something in. And I think because it was a Marine, it said, AWL Marine was, convicted of murder.
Wow. And
that was the other thing why I knew he probably did serve life, because he ended up getting in a federal court because he was an AWL. Even though he killed a civilian down on Dania Beach, he got tried as a soldier because he was even though, he never fully finished recruit, but he was still officially a Marine. So that was sort of a weird thing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, you spend whatever time at boot camp, and wasn't anything great. The big thing was the really good guys. The guy I think got PFC things out of boot camp. It was like one stripe and that. And I was still the basic guy, but I was happy to get out. And then though, after graduation, you have a couple days there before, and they're deciding where your orders are and where you're going to go and what you're going to do and all that. And so there's like this big, where do you want to go? They got all these different places, and they got them listed up on a board, where you're going. And, some guy, I want to go to radar school. I want to, this and, all the kind of crap. And I said, well, they said, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to Vietnam. And they said, well, I said, well, how do you know? I said, well, I want to. That's why I'm here. And by now I was indoctrinated. You have to go through boot camp, and they brainwash you, and stuff. It was almost sort of like a brainwash. I accepted it, but you got prayers you say to, killing people and stuff and doing all that sort. And, I was like, well, I knew, this person I thought was my uncle, what a great job he did in Korea, and all these people. I was proud that I was a Marine, and why I was in there was because of Vietnam, so that's where I needed to go. I told the DI, I said, I'm going to be really disappointed if I don't go to Vietnam. And but just before that, they pulled me into his office. The DI did one of the days, I don't know which day, but at a point in there, and they called me, and I thought I was in trouble. Perdue, get your ass in here, type of thing. And I thought, oh, what did I do now? I'm in big trouble. And he said, are you some kind of genius or something? I go, what are you talking? I have no idea what they're talking about. And they got, well, we just got your orders and your, papers, and we saw the tests that you took in that, and I guess I got, everybody, you just take a battery of tests, all sorts of stuff. And I guess I did really well on them. I have no idea, and that. And so I was sitting there to help me all this stuff. And, well, do you want to go to Officer Candidate School? Do you want to do this? Do you want to go to officer, whatever? And I was like, no, I just, I want to go do what I got to do in that. And, but that came up later on again in my career, or what short career I had in the Marine Corps. But I was like, wow, all of a sudden, all this stuff, I didn't know anything, I hated school. I just, whatever I had to do to get the minimum stuff to get out and get by and that. Now they're saying to me, I'm this kind of cup. I had no idea. But anyway, they finally came through, and it said, you're going to go to combat engineering school, combat engineer, and you're going to Vietnam. So I was happy. And of course, they tell you all this, they're telling different guys what they're going to, your chances of coming back are this, they got like a little scoreboard up there. So you're on the, and so, and I didn't really think much because I know how they are. But what was funny is my brother, when I went to Camp Lejeune, I was going to the combat engineering school and advanced infantry regiment training and all that kind of crap, where you learn to shoot every kind of weapon they have at the time, and which was actually really fun. I enjoyed that, using, flamethrower and all that kind of stuff. It was just exciting, I was still like this kid, all this stuff he could do. And so my brother was in the Navy. He came from Norfolk Base, and he knew I was going over to Vietnam. And they said I probably wouldn't get a leave before I go. I'd probably just end up. And so I said, he says, can I come back? I said, yeah, sure. You can get on the base. I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm, a sailor. They should let me on the base. So he came, but what happened was that weekend they gave us a 24-hour leave to go into town. So I go into town with all the guys. Now, he came on the base, and they really, he was a Navy guy, so they showed him all the stuff about how dangerous it was, and they said, the chances of him coming back are next to none. So I thought, oh my God, it was horrible. It was typical kind of stuff in that. And so, but at that point, I just, you sort of let it go over your head. But again, then I went from there to Camp Lejeune, and we had, infantry training. And then I went to Courthouse Bay, which is in Camp Lejeune. Camp Lejeune's a huge, it's like a state. And they drive you all over the place, different parts of the base and that, and did different things. And just in training there. And go through all that, I really enjoyed that. But while I was there, we had, like on Friday night, or that they let you go to the canteen, or like a bar, enlistment's club and that. But I was very naive about stuff. And they were having a real problem that time people like, and there's all woods, North Carolina, you know, and that. Well, the club was right off the woods there, and people would cut through the woods to go there on trails and stuff. And they were having Marines getting robbed left and right by other Marines. I mean, there was only Marines on the bay, you know, and they were having someone stabbing them and, you know, and different things. They had a guy shot and stuff. And there was a lot of trouble going on. And some of it was racial, but a lot of it was just what I call thug stuff. Like you run into on the street with, you know, people talk about gangs. They're just thugs sometimes, you know, when they're the ones that are doing bad stuff and that. I mean, it has nothing to do with race or anything. I mean, it's just, you can say that, but it's thugs killing, beating each other up or whatever they're doing, or trying to steal money or whatever. And so I was going through, another guy and I were going through the woods, you know, we come up there and all of a sudden 3 guys stop us and that. And they were, but they didn't have any knives, luckily, and that. But he says, "Give me my money." I said, "I'm not getting one. I don't hardly have any money anyway, you know." But you know, you got like $3 in your name or something, you know? and so got in a fight, you know, got through that okay. But it was, and one of the good thing was I was like our champ. I really used to do a lot of sit-ups and stuff. You know, I could really. And the first guy came, one swung and he missed, and so and another guy. Like he hit me in the stomach and I just stirred it. My stomach was like a rock. And that was a big plus for me. And I hit him and then the other guy, and then they sort of backed off and we just took off. I went to the club. And we go, "It's guys up." And he said, "Oh yeah, that's happening all the time, you know, and you're lucky they didn't shoot you." And it was funny though, and I'm going to jump ahead. Like when on my way to Vietnam, I stopped in Okinawa. And in Okinawa, we're in the barracks there. And whenever you go to a different base, they assign you duties, like if it's KP or something like that.
KP meaning?
Oh, kitchen police, they call, you know, and you mean washing dishes or peeling potatoes, whatever it is they needed to do, emptying garbage. You know, like when I first went to Camp Lejeune, I had, I think it was a week, 5 days anyway. I was on the garbage detail. And I actually rode on the back of a garbage truck and picked up the garbage can and threw them in the back of and we went into the ritzy, like, where the officers were, and they get their garbage cans and do that stuff. And sort of crazy, but you did a lot of different things in that. And people do different stuff. But when I went to Okinawa, they said, "We're going to assign you to the police unit." Police unit, the military police. So they take us over, and there's like 10 of us. And they take us over, and they get us a room, and they give us, "You're going to be our reaction squad. If there's any big trouble and we need support, we call you, and they bring you over in a van or a truck, you know, and we're giving you this big club, and that, and a helmet, you know, and you got a thing on your arm that says MP, you know, and that, and if anything happens, and okay, and so you're going to be here like, you know, 2 weeks before you go over, and so in that meantime, for this 1 week, you're going to be doing it, you know, at night, okay, and actually night and day, we were in our own little barracks, and that was for the MPs and stuff, and they said, "Now, there's something going on. We want to tell you about it." And they were, you know what Quonset huts are?
No, tell me.
They're like half dome, long metal things, and they used to put like airplanes in. But that's where they made barracks for all the military back in World War II, and they're still there, and they used them. But in the side they'd cut windows with just screens for air flow through them. Well, at night there was racial stuff going on, and both blacks and whites, just I don't know, whichever would decide was doing whatever footer. They'd come through and cut the screens and slash people with razors. So they said, "Well, when you sleep in your bunk, keep your boots on and sleep with your feet where the screen is, back, not like normally, and with your head to arm away." And you're like, okay. And they said, "Keep your club right next to the bed." And I thought, you know, like, and they were right. And I didn't have it happen right to me, but they had it on the other side, you know, and that. And it's like, so, and when that would happen, we'd have to go out and try and find the people and catch them, you know, and that. And they told us that, you know, one of the rules was that, now when you get in, you know, and you know, you've been teaching all this stuff about hand-to-hand combat and all this kind of stuff. Now, and you're going after fellow Marines, and they said, so I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to be really careful with these guys. And they said, whatever you tell them to do something, if they don't do it, use the club on them, you know, and just don't hit them in the head. We don't want to kill them, but, you know, break an arm, a leg, whatever, don't worry about it, you know. And there was, so anyway, we didn't have anybody. And then all of a sudden, it was like 2 days later. And so I think it was a Saturday afternoon or something. They have like an alarm. They would go going off. So we all quick run out to the truck. We got all our stuff in that. And they go, and everybody's going, "Where are we going?" You know, no, we're going to the mess hall. Mess hall? Yeah, there's a riot in the mess hall. the blacks and whites are fighting in the mess hall. I go, oh, God, this is great. And, we were a mixed group because, they just took 10 of us, we were, and we're all going, oh, my God. And it was like something in the West, people throwing chairs, beating, all that. I mean, it was a wild thing. And they just said, they'd done a little bit of training with us, and, go in a format, and we're clearing the place out in clubs, and mainly you didn't hit people, so you jam them in solar plexus. I mean, you could put a hurt on somebody with those clubs. And there was no doubt about it. And they said, do this and stay together, because if they pull you out separate, there's a bunch of them going to beat the hell out of you, hurt you, so, and they're throwing dishes. And I mean, and if you think getting hit by a coffee cup, like not this, but those harder ones, those solid white ones, I mean, that's like, and they were doing that, and just, it was, and breaking chairs, but they were, metal chairs like this, and there was blood all over for people. I mean, I was like, such a weird way. And we broke it up, and they had ambulance come and everything, and I arrested a bunch of them, and it was just like, boy, this is preparing me for Vietnam.
Whoa, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't even got there yet, and all this sort of excitement's going on. I'm going like, wow, this is...
So you were there, that was before you even went to Vietnam?
Oh, yeah, that was before Vietnam, yeah.
So you went from Camp Lejeune,
Well, no, I went from Camp Lejeune. I was in 3 different places in Camp Lejeune. And...
Just a light.
Which one's the light? I think this one's the light.
You got it.
Oh,
We went to
good for him.
Yeah, it's making a noise. Sorry about that. We'll probably have to have it off.
Which light?
Yeah. Sorry about that. But.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
So anyway, jumping back, when Courthouse Bay was a separate part of a little owned part of the base and that's where all the engineers were, and basically combat engineers. And mainly the reason it was separate is we learned how to blow things up. That was a big thing. We didn't learn much about building stuff. We learned how to destroy stuff. That was what we were learning to do, how to blow different stuff up and that. And so whatever we could learn there. And so then from there, there was Camp Geiger, which was, I guess, like an advanced infantry type of thing. And then we went to another one after that where I remember they had like a simulated Vietnam village, and we went in there to how to, and it was so funny because the veterans were there to train us. And I remember the guy saying to me, he was a nice guy, and he says, we're going to tell you the way it really is when you get over that. And he says, now, when you get in a village, they're talking, and they were all NCOs, and non-commissioned officers, like sergeants and stuff like that. And he said, when you get in the village now, you want to separate immediately all the young people from the elderly people. And he said, if you have any problems, he says, you kill the elderly first. I'm going, I didn't like shock, but you're thinking inside, and they said, well, they know they don't have anything to lose. So if somebody's going to go after you to attack you, it's much more likely them, a father or a grandfather or somebody. The older they are, more likely. And so they're telling us all this stuff, and how to get information out of people. I'm going, wow, this is like, this is serious. You don't really think about this before, and people start talking about, they talk about torture, but there's things that are not torture, but you still need to get information and stuff like that. And just, I'm thinking, wow, this is just in training. What's going to happen when we really go over the real stuff? Anyway, it was interesting. So I got through that, and they said, you have a choice now. You can either have like a week or less than a week, thing, and you can fly home on a plane, and that for, I think like a long weekend, like a 3 or 4 day weekend, and that, and then you got to report in California. Well, I didn't have any money, and when I went in, they had just signed things for all of them, and I sent the most of it home to my mother. I was hoping she would save it. She didn't, but at least, she needed. She didn't have any money, and so I just, and I didn't need. I had room and board and everything, but they wouldn't let you send all your money home. I think I got like, I don't know, $75. It wasn't much. I don't know, and I think I kept like $20, a month. That was my monthly stipend or something. But you really didn't need any money. Everything was paid for, and stuff. Pretty much, and. It seemed to me most of the guys that were really spending money, they were either gambling from other pies or they were just wasting it on, booze or something like that. And so I didn't need it. And so I said, well, I can't afford to fly home and, then fly out to California and that, even if it was reduced fares and all that kind of stuff, And I just said, well, do I have to do it? And they said, oh, no, you can just, go and you'll go to California. You'll stay here on the base and so that's what I did. And, it was, then I went to Camp Pendleton, which is that big base out in California. And we got, that was our what we called a staging battalion, and staging to leave to Vietnam. But so they had like, we got jungle warfare training in the mountains of California, things like that. And they had a place called Sheep Shit or something like that, real steep mountain. I remember the guy. But I like that kind of, I like physical stuff. So I did well there in that.
So it was like they were at this point, they're preparing you more so for perhaps like the physical traversing the land? Or?
Yeah, stuff. Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, doing a lot of that and stuff. And just in tactics, starting to do a little more tactics. And we went on hikes longer. And then we went to, they had a simulated prisoner war game. Well, they had war game, like a war game. And there was some of the Marines were, but it turned out it was Marines that were based there that were like the bad guys, the gooks. And so we were supposed to get, and then they would capture us. But it was all, they had all had it planned. I mean, it wasn't like, and it was to get you used, and then they'd interrogate and do different things to see what it was like. And they had escape and invasion stuff, and so we were to do all that kind of stuff. I don't know, we were there like a month or whatever doing that kind of junk. And then the last weekend, they gave us a weekend pad. We had 2 ways to go. Well, and I went to Disney World. I remember the guys laughed. But I had heard about Disney. They didn't have, not Disney World, I mean, Disneyland. Yeah. There was no Disney World then, in Florida. There was nothing, it was just Disneyland there. And, I grew up around, and I thought, gee, I'd always like to go. And I remember about 2 other guys went to Disneyland too, but 75% of the guys went to Tijuana, because we're close to, Mexico. It was a short ride, like an hour ride down into Mexico. And they went to Tijuana, and I said, I don't know. I'm glad I didn't after when I heard the stories and they came back. I mean, they're wild stories, that, but I didn't need any of that. And so I spent the week at Disneyland, and it was a good time. It was something I didn't, And do we need to stop or something?
No. I'm just checking it to make sure you're still in the focus. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, I did that, and then I remember. And I met guys, there was all different guys from different unit training stuff and veterans grouped together in staging. So there was guys that had been to Vietnam already and that they were in staging, was going back for another tour and that. And so it was very interesting, and had a couple friends. One guy, he was Hispanic, but I don't remember where exactly he was from, but he had gotten shot with a 50 caliber in Vietnam. And I don't know if you know what a 50 caliber, I mean, it is, it's a huge bullet. I mean, and he had a big, where his leg had been. I was surprised. He said if it had hit the bone, it missed the bone. It just took like a size of a big fist out of his leg,
Whoa.
He was very lucky. And, because if he probably wouldn't have had a leg, or not a very good working leg if it had hit him in the bone, type 50. And I mean, 50 calibers are anti-aircraft or, or for tanks and stuff, not for people, and they're not, but they use them against people, So then I had another guy that was my bunk next to me. He was from, I think New Mexico, but he was, I think an Apache. He was an Indian. I think it was Apache, but he was a full-blooded Indian, but it was his second tour going back to Vietnam. And
wow.
He was like a wealth of knowledge for all. He had all stories and stuff he was telling us. But he said on that weekend, he was going home to the reservation he came back and he brought, now Apache, they have sort of like Mexican food, but it's but he brought back these I'm going to call them tacos or whatever for, his mother had made all this food to bring back. And it was like a grocery bag when he brings it into our where we're sleeping in the bunk area, and there's like 20 of us in there. And he said, I got no problem with my family. If anybody wants some. Oh, wow, I got to try it. We were all fighting for the water fountain. It's one of the hottest things I've eaten hotter stuff since then, or as hot, but my mouth was like on fire. And I'm like, you eat this? And the guys are like, they're actually pulling guys away from to get the water. And then they're in the sinks in the kitchen, in the bathrooms trying to, it was like, wow, man. Unbelievable.
That's funny.
You eat this? No wonder you're tough. He was like a tough guy, And this boy, it was funny. I always remember that kind of stuff. And so then we left there, and it was funny because, I'm thinking we're getting on some kind of military plane, and there's like a big Pan Am or nice, airplane, and we all get on there. Stewardess is on there and that, and, we're in uniform, and we flew to Hawaii. And then we landed in Hawaii. But we were only there for the day because I guess they were, I don't know what they were doing, refueling, picking up more. And so again, it was this nice airline but it was all of us military personnel. Yeah. And it wasn't just Marine, there was other, I guess it was just chartered for the military,
Gotcha.
And they
so not just Marines, but Army guys, Navy guys.
Yeah, whatever. There was a whole bunch of stuff. So, and we pretty much behaved. I mean, we were a little rowdy probably, but so we fly to Okinawa. That's where we ended up. We land there, and I think we were there a week or two, probably 2 weeks in that. And so left to Okinawa after all those stories I told you about. Then Okinawa was a neat place. And but the one nice thing is on the weekends, on Saturday night, we were allowed to go into town. And that was like a big deal. And Okinawa's Japan. And so it was like a
new country, outside of the world. Yeah.
But we went to the section. It was probably like the bar type of take the guy for every penny you can, con him out or stuff. But it was still neat. It was really, and I really liked Okinawa for what little bit I saw of it. But there was a big military presence. So anyway, we left that and we flew by again, another one of those kind of planes, right into Da Nang. And then that's when things start to change. They'd decide to send you to a different unit, and they're staging you and moving you and different around and all that. And but the funny thing with me was, and I saw guys I knew in it. So I get sent into the main headquarters area in Da Nang, and I thought, oh, well, no. And I thought, when am I going out in the field? Not. And they said, we're assigning you to a bridge company. You're going to build bridges out in the jungle. Okay, that sounds like really exciting. Like I knew nothing about that. And so they said, you're going out in the next couple of days. We went out and there was like a major or a colonel with us. I was like surprised I did. But I think the reason was because he was like an engineer. He probably really knew how to build a bridge and the rest of them just an idiot.
Just brought along for the ride.
Yeah, and we were going to build this like sort of build it, but it was like an erector set sort of to go across the river or whatever. And it was moving pretty quick in that and stuff. And just as we started doing it, there was like, bam, 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 bam. And I'm going, I think somebody, are they shooting at us? You know what I mean? And then, like in the jungle, you'd hear noises through the jungle, like, or it's like those are bullets flying through the And then our CEO, I don't know whoever was there, is you get out, we're getting, whatever, we're getting attacked, but it was really sort of hectic. I mean, I thought it would be a lot more organized than it was. And people would just run around and we had set our rifles down because we were working, more stuff, so you didn't have that on. So we quick ran for that to get, and stuff. And then you're trying to figure, and somebody says, go over that way, but you're not really sure what you're doing, but you didn't say do anything.
Yeah.
So that went on for a little while. And then I guess everything sort of calmed down in that. And then somebody came and they said, I think they were dragging some people through the thing. I think they were like, I don't know if they were prisoners or just wounded or they got, whatever. And never did, other than that somebody had tried to attack us, I guess, what was going on. Never did figure that one out. But it was a good example about how that war is. So much of the time you didn't know what the hell was going on. And people would tell me stuff, and then I talked to the other people later, and it was like a total different story. I'm going like, and that's what sort of started me on, I'm going to say, my anti-war thing. Not that, but I realized things weren't what I thought they were and what people told me. And we got a thing called the Stars and Stripes. And I'd read that, and we'd do something, go on an operation or something. Then I'd come back and read about it in the Stars and Stripes, and I go, no, that isn't the same thing I was on. Like that's totally, I don't remember any of that. That was totally different. Well, what's going on here? And not that it was bad or good, but it was like, they need to get new reporters or something. I don't know who's doing all this stuff. They're either bullshitting or I don't know what's going on. Something isn't right here. And, but but it wasn't, I thought, I was going to get I said, aren't I getting signed to some kind of, And he said, well, we need you here right now and that. And I said, we want you to stay at headquarters. So I was there like another week. And this is only like the second week I'm in country. And there was, at night, there was some mortars came in, we'd all run and hide in a bunker, and they couldn't wait to see it was out. And then they'd tell us, one night there was sappers, those are people sneak into, they shot them in the wire, and that. So it was like, nothing really happened directly to me, but it was like, boy, a lot of stuff's going on, and it was nerve-wracking, type of. And I said, but I said, I wanted to get out more into really, I don't want to be back in this where they're trying to attack a big headquarters area. And we weren't too far from the air base and stuff like that. And I was talking to him, and he says, well, you don't have to worry about it. You're going someplace. I says, oh, wow, yeah, I'm excited. Where am I going? They go, well, you're going back to Okinawa. I said, what? We've decided, we looked at your record, we want you to get some more training.
Wow.
Okay. So next morning, I'm going to a different plane, and I'm at the airport, and there's another plane with all these people getting off, and they're getting on. And here's a couple guys that I went to boot camp with, and they're getting on off the plane. They go, hey, he said, where are you going? And I'm going, Okinawa. And they go, what? They're just coming in, landing there. And I said, they're sending me back to Okinawa. And somebody says, and I forget what they called it. You know how they have the show NCIS type thing? Well, there's something else that they didn't call them NCIS, but there was something else that was like, no, they thought I was like an undercover cop or something. Because why was I going back? All this stuff. And they said that. I said, whatever. And I just laughed at them. But I found out later, a lot of people thought I was like,
wow,
something, because why was I going? So anyway, I go back there, and they wanted somebody to get certain training with the handling munitions and different things for, where we were doing and that. And they thought I was a good candidate for doing that, whatever and that. And I really did enjoy the training. I was there for a couple of weeks training, and then there was, actually I went to another school for a week, and then they said, well, you're going back to Vietnam. I said, when am I going back? Type of thing. They said, you're going back. So they sent me, when I got back there, I went back to the exact same place I was at, the headquarters thing and that. And I tell them I went and asked to see the CO, and I said, I'm really unhappy. And I thought I came here to, fight in the, whatever, I don't feel like I'm doing that. I want to go out in the field and that. And they said, you sure you want to do that? No. I came all this way. I feel like I need to do that. I should be involved in that. And he said, well, we'll see. So about a day or two later, they said, you got orders, the end of the week here, get your stuff all together. You're going to be getting shipped out. And where are you going in that? And they said, you're going to go to Hill 37. Well, I go, where's Hill 30? I had no idea,
Right, what is that?
Yeah. And then they said Liberty Bridge. And that. Anyway, southwest of Da Nang is a city called An Hoa. Well, about midway in between it is a hill. And actually, one side of it is an Army military base. And I mean, it's not that big a hill, but it's a hill, And the other side was Marines. And I forget which Marine unit was there, 3-1 or something. And then there was an engineering unit and support unit and that. And so I was getting sent there and that. And then that road that went by there was a big bridge there. And then it went down farther, and there was another bridge across the river. And then it went to An Hoa, this place, An Hoa. You go farther out in the boonies, and so, of course, more. But they had a big, helicopter base and all that at An Hoa, and an artillery support base. So they had big guns there, 8-inch guns and stuff. And so anyway, that's where I ended up. And basically our role was, as combat engineers, was to keep that road open. And that meant making sure the bridges stayed in one piece, if they needed repaired, but also, and the biggest thing, which was most of my training had been geared for, was handling explosive ordnance, and was mines and booby traps and that in the road, to keep the road from being, because there's all the supply and the troops and everything was down there. And that's what I did. And so we basically had a routine once I got settled into there. There was 3 platoons in our company that were there, and there was a company of us to do this. And we would take turns, like, one day we'd sweep, you go the road, I think it was like 5, I don't know, whatever distance it was. We'd get up early in the morning, go the whole road and, check it to make sure there weren't mines and booby traps and stuff for it so that people can move on it. And then at night, sometimes, I'm going to skip around just because it makes it easier to tell you. And then you get assigned to different things. And one time I got assigned to where we went down to Liberty Bridge, which is bridges out in the middle of like boonies, it's out in, and he actually, not when I was right there, but several times the NVA had tried to overrun it and stuff like, so it was not, it was, and I remember there that night, the thing I remember memorable about it, I slept under a big bulldozer because there was mortars coming in, and another guy and I, we crawled under the bottom. We said, boy, we got that big heavy bulldozer. We're pretty safe in here. And we slept on the dirt under the, under the bulldozer, but we felt very safe, secure. And usually what would happen is they would shoot a couple mortars and then they wouldn't do it because they didn't want us to pinpoint where they were because we could kill them then, or whatever and that. But they were always testing to see because they wanted to get that bridge and knock it out. And so they'd also have guys that, we had infantry there with us too. And ours was dealing with the mines and explosives and stuff. But the infantry, they'd sit on the bridge and look for stuff. Anything floating down the bridge, they could shoot at it. If it was, and in the morning sometimes I was down there and I didn't have to do it myself, but they were pulling bodies out, and there wasn't necessarily people they killed, but it being killed something, they're floating down the river, and they tried to stop it because they didn't want, and they didn't want explosives under the bodies to get onto the, the bridge to blow it up or stuff. So I learned a lot just from talking, that kind of stuff. And then some, we went on operations to support the infantry to clear out areas and that. And I think it was called a tow line at the time, but I saw them on TV recently. They're using them in the Ukraine, but it's a line you shoot out and it's got all this explosive on it. It goes out about 1,000 yards or more on it, pretty far. And then you detonate it, and that path where it detonates, it's going to blow up all the mines and stuff. And then that's your path to go through safely. And so we do stuff like that to, so that the troops could go through and that. And I remember one time, the very first time I went on one of those kind of operations. I mean, they're not a big operation, but I had several of the guys with me in the platoon and squads, and the one squad was behind me, and then I was the lieutenant, and he said, we're getting ready to do this, and all of a sudden we started taking small arm fire, and I turned around, and the rest of the squad's running the other way. And I was like, I was so like in shock to think that Marines were running from, it was drilled in me in boot camp. The way a Marine does is you go towards it. And and it really does, if you want to survive, if somebody is, you go for it and kill them, take them out, rather than just sitting there and hoping they don't hit you, type of thing. Unless you're inside, a bunker or something and you're shooting at, which, that happened type of thing. But I was like, and the lieutenant's going, stop those guys. We're supposed to shoot them or what? And then they did stop. We yelled, screamed at them and that. But I was like, it was like, things aren't what you think they are when you get into war. People aren't always like they think, these. And I remember, heroes aren't always what you think they're going to be, and the kind of stuff that I'll leave it at that. I don't want to put on air too much what I, but, guys tell me stuff. So I take everything with a little grain of salt. I've seen enough now that I look at things a lot differently than I used to and that. And, sometimes it's just circumstance and stuff happen. If certain things happen, common sense says you do something, and if it protects you and somebody else or saves your ass, it's good. And next thing somebody saying, "Oh my God, you did something," and really you're just doing what any idiot would do in this situation if they had any common sense, And but it was just that daily thing, and when I got to be a squad leader, I got meritorious promoted because, like I said, I was just a private when I went over, and I got promoted quickly. They, I guess that happens in war situations. So I went from an E1 to an E4 pretty quickly, but that made me a squad leader. So then I had to be in charge of people and stuff. And I remember the very first day I took my first group out to check for the roads, to clear them and all that. And you have 2 point men that walk out front, to check, and all of a sudden one goes, boom, I see him flying up in the air, and I was like, oh shit. And so we handled it all right. He lost his leg, though, the guy did. I'm sorry to hear that. But, it just, and then we found other mines on the internet. And what was sort of distressing to me, and I can't say distressing, but it was annoying, we found out that the local kids knew about it in the village, but they don't tell us. And we try to bribe them. And, we always thought we were there. I was naive. We're there to help them in that. They hated us in reality. That's what I found out later. Most of them, they didn't like us. And, we were just, they wanted our money and food and whatever we could, but they didn't like it. And I could see it because, we roamed the place. I mean, if we wanted to walk into parts and that, and you got guns in it, I mean, they weren't stopping you. It's sort of like, you try to be, but a lot of guys weren't very nice to people either. I mean, and, I read a statistic when I was over there, and I know more about it now, but, my friend that was the truck driver, he told me, he says, you wouldn't believe how many gooks we run over, and I'm like, and I heard that, I think we killed more people with the trucks than actually in actual fire, with rifles or something like that. Wow. Some, running over them and stuff. I mean, it's their country and their road, and these big trucks are just, and they didn't have, they had a few cars, but mainly it was bicycles or walking or, something like that. And just, but at the same time, I had a lot of empathy for them because we had one time we swept the road and we said, it's all clear the morning, and we'd start real early, right after, we waited to daylight so we could see stuff, we didn't want to be, hunt for mines in the dark, not a good thing to do, or booby traps. And we found, I got good at, try to learn what, they leave markers out for their own people to recognize. So if you could learn things that the Vietnamese do, you could use it against them sort of and find stuff that they, but this day we missed it, I guess, and we got finished the road, felt good. We were going back having breakfast, and we used to, eat fairly good, and we fixed all, and all of a sudden you hear, boom, and next time the lieutenant's in there, come on, let's go, quick. And the road we just swept a command detonated, which means it wasn't like a pressure mine. It just, somebody had a wire somewhere with a remote switch, and they were going to set it off. And a bus full of Vietnamese people and armed soldiers, and that's how they traveled around a bus. Even the soldiers, they'd be hanging off and they'd be all over. They weren't real big buses like we have in this country, but it's a bus, and they're hanging all over the damn thing. They sit on the roof and that. And it, I think it was like equivalent to like a 155, a big explosive. And it just, there was pieces of people and buses all over everywhere, and so we went down there right away to look in, and see what happened, but we also then had to help, rightfully so. And I felt bad, but not that bad. I knew we didn't do it, but you still, like we cleared the road and, they assumed and, but obviously, and it was Vietnamese that had gotten killed. It wasn't, like, I'm sure they would have rather had an American truck they blew up, but they were taking whatever they could, I guess, at the time. And just things like that, and, but what was interesting about that, I read it in the Stars and Stripes later on. And the way they wrote it in the story, and that was like totally different. And, oh, boy, they put a different slant on that one, Because, technically, you could almost say we contributed to it, and that because we missed the thing. And it wasn't that, the way they looked at it was, the way they wrote it, I should say. It was, these murderers killed innocent women and children. They saw them and destroy, go bust to kill them and that. And I don't think that was that at all. Stuff. But, I don't know. That was pretty much it until... one of the big bridges that I told you we took care of, one night we went out on it and tanks had drove over it in the daytime. And so, you figure it's pretty good. And we're walking across with some stuff I think we were going to repair something on it. I don't remember exactly what it was. And next thing I fell through it. And, but I didn't go all the way down to the water. But I fell through, and part of the wood or whatever had given way. And, next thing I remember, the guys are pulling me up in that, and I go, and they said, do this. And I said, I can't do that. I can't feel my arm. I can't move over there, And they go, And then one of them says, "Oh, you're going home." You know, what? You know, like, what is it? And I had crushed my right scapula and had nerve damage, and I couldn't use my right arm, you know, in that. And but it was, you know, like somebody told me later, you know, that's like a good, you know, like those kind of where guys shoot themselves in the foot to go home type of thing, that kind of. But I'd been there 10 months and 22 days, and so I guess it was time for me to go home. And and I thought it was a night and that, but I thought, you know, they're going to bring a medevac helicopter, because after like 15 minutes, I was really hurting. I was I didn't feel too good, and they go, well, we can't bring a helicopter in here. You know, it's too dangerous. We don't want the helicopter to get shot down. I go, okay, yeah. And so the next day, then they pump you up. They give you stuff to make you feel good, you know, which I didn't like. I couldn't sleep. I was like, you were out of it, but I was so worried that, we're going to get attacked or something, and I can't do a thing, you know, just lay here like an idiot. But the next, we got in a little ambulance, and they drove into Da Nang, which was, I don't know exactly how far away it was, you know, and but it was one of those military ambulances. So it was not a nice ride. But went to First Med, which is, and I went in there, and they were bringing in a bunch of other people that just got ambushed in an ambush, and they were all. I was laying in, and at first they thought, I guess I was with them or something. And I said, I don't have any bullet holes in me. I just, but they took me into an X-ray and looked at it, and they wrapped me up, and they said, well, you're going home. I go, oh, okay. And so I stayed, I guess, there that night, and then they moved me to, there was a hospital on the Air Force Base in Da Nang there, and that's where where you go. And I was going to Japan. That's where they sent me to Yokosuka, Japan. There was a big military, I didn't know it at the time. There was a big military base, and it was just full of people from Vietnam that got hurt. And when I went over on the flight, it was on a big, what is the kind where you drive the Jeeps up in, like a C-130, but bigger, you know, one of those like a Globemaster, and it was made into like a hospital. And, you know, a couple guys died on the plane on our way to Japan, you know, and they were, you know, critical, you know, they had IVs, it was like almost like an operating room in the back of the airplane there and that. And so we flew to Japan, and I don't know, I think I was there a week in Japan, Yokosuka, and then, but it was sort of an interesting thing because we're in the bed there, and one day some high-ranking officer comes around, and he's putting medals on the bed and stuff like that. And a guy that was next to me was in the same engineering unit that I was in, but I didn't know him. It was, you know, he was in a different platoon somewhere else, and he was a water specialist, and he was with some infantry and giving them water, making sure they had fresh water and all that. And they got attacked by some sappers, which are basically just Viet Cong or NVA in some case, that have basically explosives on them, and either they blow themselves up or they throw them, you know. And this guy had a bunch of hand grenades on him, and the guy saw him, and I'm trying to remember his name, but anyway, because we were both from the same battalion unit, you know, same engineering and stuff, and he said, I saw the guy, but I didn't think to pick up my gun, and I saw him pull a grenade and threw it at me, and he says, I ran over, so I rolled over, and it went boom, but it hit, you know, a lot of shrapnel hit him, and I think he might have been, they were afraid that he might have been paralyzed from the waist down from some of the shrapnel hitting him in the back and that, but he said, you know, and he had some issue. We were talking, you know, you just lay in bed there, so you got to, you know, not a lot. And there was all these different people you're talking to, and you know, and it was really crowded. I mean, I was surprised how crowded the hospital. I mean, it wasn't like two men to a room or something. There was wards with like a bunch of people, and it was all mixed up. There was another guy, I was talking to him. He kept getting out of bed and walking around with the IV bag, but he was sort of neat. He was a Green Beret guy. He must have gotten shot 9 times or something, and he'd been there a while and had a bunch of operations, and he was like, yeah. But he was an interesting guy, and so I'm meeting all these people and talking. It was just sort of interesting, just being there. And I was trying to. I wasn't good at eating with my left hand, so they had, and I was very impressed with it. They had ladies that they turned out they were officers' wives that were their husbands were stationed there in Yokosuka, you know, either on the air base. air base with a hospital and marine, I guess all sorts of stuff, Navy and that.
Mm-hmm.
But they would come there and they would help, like, if you needed to eat or read or something, like, some of us couldn't see in that because they're, I don't know whether they were blind or just all bandaged up in that. So they'd read to them. And I don't know what time of the year. I don't think it was Christmas. No, it wasn't Christmas, but it was weird. They came in singing to us and Christmas carols, like, but it was nice. We really enjoyed it. They came into the Bay Area, and there was like 5 or 6 of them, and they were singing. And so it was sort of a neat thing there. And then you stayed there for whatever. I guess they evaluated. They really didn't do anything to me much. They took more X-rays and different things and that, and they wrapped my arm all up and stuff and had things, but. And they said, well, you're going back to the U.S. for surgery. And I said, okay, whatever. I'm going back, and that was sort of neat. I knew I was going home, so I was excited about that. And so from there, I flew to, finally, and the flights are like ridiculous. You went to Hawaii. Again, you get off, they give you a rest, they take you. And then from there, we went to El Toro, I think it was, or one of those air bases in California. And again, they I mean, you'd say, well, why get off the plane? But you want, after, and just when you're hurt too, you want some moving or something to change because it's like, really got me off this plane. And then we went from there to a place in Alabama. There's a big military, I guess one time too, there used to be like a leper colony there maybe or something in the U.S. Was there something like that? And I'm trying, anyway, we stopped there and that hospital and dropped off people. And then we got back on, and then we flew to Jacksonville Naval Air Station. And that's right. I went to Jacksonville Naval Hospital, and I was there for, I think, a couple months. And then they gave me a 30-day leave to go home. And then I went back to Camp Lejeune. And when I was in Camp Lejeune, and I was rehabbing all that time in that, and I did really well on my rehab. I didn't want to be disabled. I didn't want to, I knew guys that, why'd you should just got out on disability. Yeah, I wanted to be back doing everything I did before. And they had a gym there at the hospital for rehab and I said, well, can I come back after rehab? And they said, well, we don't want you to do too much at night. But every day I was there, I did as much as I possibly could. And it paid off, I did. And everything came back to pretty much normal. Sometimes things bother you, but, so when I went back up to North Carolina and to wait, I got put in a transition or a unit where you just sort of hang out. It's like they don't have really a job for you in that, and you just sort of hang around there. And my big thing was I'd mop the floors in the morning, and that. And it was a nice facility, but it was, it really wasn't much. And they called me in and they said, we got a couple choices for you. One, because of your scores and records and what you've done in that, we can stay in and you can go off to Officers Candidate School, and we'll actually send you also to either a military academy or a university. You have to work that out with them, but you could end up at Annapolis possibly, whatever. Well, I was like, I didn't really know what to think of that. And but I had taken 2 correspondence courses. By the time when I was in Vietnam, when I got there, I found out you could take correspondence courses with the University of Florida. So I signed up for them, and one was sociology, and one was basic introduction to psychology or whatever, psychology 101 or whatever it's called. And so I took those 2 the whole time I was there, and I finished them. You'd mail them off a week or something, or whatever it was, and it was. 10 months I was there, I did 2 little classes. So, it wasn't like, but you have a lot of downtime. There's time that you're sitting just hanging around waiting to go out or not, and sometimes I didn't understand that, but also when you went out sometime, and like there was days, you lived 30 days on sea rats, I liked them. It wasn't bad, but that's a stressful time. You need to get people to relax. They'd have a lot more burnout, people if they did. I thought they did things pretty well. Sometimes the stress of, I've found over my life, in both after the department, sometimes being in the middle of something is a lot easier than waiting for it. Or after, the anticipation. I remember we'd be by the bridge, Liberty Bridge area, and be in like a foxhole. We'd have a hole bit with sandbags, right? That we'd be, guarding, and you're out there all night, and you can't fall asleep. You take turns. It'd be like three of you maybe in the thing, and you have coffee. You make heat up a little can of coffee, and drink it, and but it's on the swamp, and it's really hard. And in the morning, there'd be like a mist that come up, and the way that changed. And they said the worst time, the time they usually attack you is like 4 to 5 in the morning because it's that time. And you'd be like, looking at somebody out there, I thought I saw. And usually there'd be things, that move and, all sorts of crap. It could drive you crazy. And if you do that long, it is stressful. I mean, I don't think. It's like if you did anything that was real tedious and really important to you, it wears you out. And that's so that was good that they used to try that. And but I'm still jumping back because of my family life growing up and the abuse and alcohol in it. And that I drank some in high school, but it was just at parties to get drunk in that. But when I went into service, I said I'm not going to drink anymore, and I was glad. And when I went to Vietnam, I saw guys that especially what we called the old lifers, NCOs that had been in a long time and that. I mean, they were almost drunk almost half the time. I mean, they that was a crutch to, they made things go. I mean, you'd see some things that we were going out, this is like that's a real bad area. They were nipping the bottle and, that was, I didn't want any part of that and stuff. And so I never had any issues with drugs, although I knew things like that went on, but it was never something that I had personal experience with or anything like that. And so I just never had any drinks or anything like that after that. And I haven't, I take back, my wedding, I had a sip of champagne or something. That's probably the most I've had in 50 years, and stuff. So I don't know, that's questions you may have for me. I don't know, did I give you enough information?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
I want to ask about kind of your time after you returned. How did you feel? What was it like to come back?
Well, I thought it was, first of all, I was basically, back to normal by the time they let me out. They said, gave me a discharge, and I didn't have a lot of money. And even then, because 90% of the money I sent home. And my mom needed it. I mean, that's why we still had a house, I guess. If I hadn't done that, there wouldn't have. And I left my car that I had at the time, and she had sold that, but I understand. I mean, she basically sold everything that I had except for clothes I left there. And I took a bus back, and I got back at late at night, and I walked from the bus station, which I didn't realize nowadays. Back then, it didn't seem far to me. Nowadays, it would seem like a really far away stuff. But it was in the middle of the night. Nobody bothered me. I had a sea bag, my sea bag, and I was in uniform because you travel like for half price when you're in uniform, or maybe it was next to nothing if you're in your uniform. And so it was my last bus, so I wanted to save money, so I traveled in that, and I got home and. But first thing I knew, people were different. Like my friends that I tried to look up in, like high school, and I didn't tell them, but I noticed that they didn't take things as seriously in that, and things were a lot different to them. I mean, I don't know if I was more mature or, whatever, but it was definitely different in that. And the girls were different and stuff like that. And I had one focus. I learned when I got out of the service, I said, I want to I need a better education. And so I wanted to go to school. And and I knew that I could get the GI Bill to help me. So that would help. And that was really the key, because then I said, I got to get a job, but it didn't have to be part-time because I'm going to go to school. And so that was my primary focus ever. And I wanted to go see some friends, but I really didn't. They were all still the way I was before I went in. A lot of, they wanted to go out partying and whatever, and I just didn't have time for that. And so I went to the community college, and they said, well, you've got to take some remedial courses. And I said, well, whatever I got to do, I got to do. So I just got real busy there, and I went back to the gas station that I used to work at part-time when I was in high school and that. And I said, you can work here at nights, late at night, 11 to 7, and then okay, I'm here, and so I got that and got a couple of little jobs and went to school full time and went from there. And then I started getting better jobs as I went along, more kept, but still school was part time, and I was trying to get through. And then I ran it to school into some veterans and stuff when we talked about Vietnam. And at that point, I was reading a lot about. I really learning about Vietnam that I hadn't. But I had now all this personal experience. I could relate to what I was reading, and everything had changed for me. And then I went to a thing for the SDS, not because I wanted to be SDS, but they said they were doing a presentation about Vietnam and that at the college. And I said, I wanted to, see what they were saying and what was going on. And I listened to some of the things they said, and some of them I believe, but then there was, people were saying, well, they're communists. And so there was a guy there that I didn't really know him, but I'd seen him around school and he was an SDS guy. So I started talking to him and and he said, well, I'll give you information, this stuff. And I didn't really go to what their thought, but it all of a sudden I was questioning in my mind a lot of stuff, and I wanted to know more. I just had this thirst. What little bit of time extra I had, I wanted to find out about things. And then I started contacting some veterans that I knew and people in the area, and we started thinking. And the next thing I knew, there was a big demonstration in Washington, D.C. I don't know, like that, when there was 1 million people. And I said, well, we're all going to go up there. And how are we going to get there? We'll buy a bus. And so we found an old bus and we bought it, and we all chipped in, and we got it running. And I was like I was mechanically inclined, so we got it running, and there was like 20 of us, and we're going to Washington, D.C. Well, we made it up into Virginia somewhere, and the bus broke down, just fell apart. I mean, we pushed it off to the side of the road, and I never saw it again. And so we walked and hitchhiked our rest of the way into D.C., and they were all the civil disobedience was going on, got in the middle of that. And so that was my career into, I guess, first starting into like that kind of stuff and really saying I was part of it. And I think I had the good fortune to meet some of the nun that used to hang out with the Berrigans. I don't remember her name, but we ran into different people that were really into the thing. And so they helped educate me in different things. But I didn't take people's words for it, because I remember from what I learned in the service, what people tell you and you read sometimes isn't always the facts, but it was more information. And I started comparing stuff like that. And so then when we came back from there, and some of the guys who were with me got arrested. And so we stayed up a couple extra days to try and get them out of jail. And it wasn't a big arrest, just for like, whatever, protesting and something. And I remember I slept one night out in the woods outside Washington, D.C. There were some woods just outside Washington, D.C. in Virginia, and it snowed on us. And this is in May, and I'm like,
wow.
I woke up freezing. I'm going, oh my God. I had a sleeping bag, but it was like, and there's snow on it. And I'm going, it wasn't a lot, but it was still like,
still snow.
Florida boys. And they sure didn't have any of this in Vietnam. And so we get back to Florida, and it was like more meeting people and seeking out things that were about the war. And I went down to the Unitarian Church, was very active, got to know them. They were, and I was very impressed by them. Then in the Catholic Church, and I was raised Catholic. And I wasn't a good Catholic, but I was raised Catholic. And so I gravitated to that. And the Unitarian Church with the Catholic Church down in Miami had a anti-war group in that. And so I ended up meeting with some of them in that. But I didn't have much money, so I couldn't be traveling all over and doing stuff in that. But I became active. But I got some better jobs, and I was making a little bit of money. I had a car and stuff, but it was, not much of a car. But I started meeting people, and there was, I saw a sign for VVAW, and so I was aware of it, but I never really had any contact. And so, but there was some veterans that we got together, and there were also some that had been with me to Washington, and we said, we ought to start to get together and do something. And I said, I got an idea. Why don't we go? And they were having some kind of a veterans thing, and the American Legion, we challenged them to have a debate, or at least to discuss Vietnam in this public forum and that. And So they jumped at it, and I said, we're Vietnam vets, and that, and we tore them up on it. I mean, we made them look really bad, like idiots. But in a way, that was bad because we just alienated them more than they were already alienated. But I was able to, and I'm sure you saw the picture of us as Gainesville Eight.
And where?
Gainesville Eight, you've seen that picture?
Yes.
You notice I don't look like any of the others in the picture? Okay, well, that's what I was back. I mean, if I went to something like that, I'd dress up in a suit and I'd go, because they looked at you were a bunch of hippies and stuff like that. And so, and I had a friend that had went into politics, and not a good friend, but and he said, he impressed upon me how important it is to have certain kind of image. Might not be image, but when you want to go talk, if you're diametrically opposed or opposite of what they believe in or see or that, you already killed yourself. And so I tried to go and talk to people and things that were not what most demonstrators did in that. And not that there was anything wrong with it. I understand why they were doing it, and I understood, Guerrilla Theater. And so when we had saw Guerrilla Theater, we decided the 4th of July was coming up, and so we need to do something, And then, by now there was like 15 of us vets that were in the that were just sort of, meeting stuff with people. And we'd also have a forum. We did a public forum type thing at a bank. We got the bank president and talked to him, and let us. And we had people that business people come in and talking to us about it, and we would try to tell them. And I really didn't believe we were really accomplishing much, but after Gainesville Eight later on, I thought, that's what makes me so happy with our system of government. A single vote, single person's voice, you do make a difference. And that's why I think it's very important. And I feel sort of funny talking about this, and I don't know where this goes, but I think it is important that you get out there and talk to people. And I'll always have time for somebody to listen to them and that. But anyway, we came up with something. We said, one of the big things why we're in Vietnam that Nixon used it was the domino theory, the communist right. Well, we had the communist right in Cuba, we'd say. So we said, well, we'll build a bunker on the beach for 4th of July, and we'll man it to protect from the communists coming over from Cuba. And so I said, well, we better research as much as we could in that. And we did. So we went to Fort Lauderdale Beach, right where all the college kids go, a big, busy place. And a friend of mine at the time, his dad owned one of these warning companies for road, puts up road signs and that. But he had like 1 million sandbags, And I said, can you give us the sandbags? So we got the sandbags and we filled them with sand, put them in a truck and that. And we planned it all out, like a little military operation. And we got there real early in the morning, and we built this little, sort of what you see in Vietnam, those sandbag bunkers type of thing. And we put it on the beach and a big American flag in there and that, And we had a veterans thing up there, not VVAW because we weren't VVAW, but we did that, and sure enough, right. But first, nobody's saying anything. But then a lifeguard comes in. What are you doing here on the beach? I go, well, we got a right to be on the beach, type of thing. And we had researched some stuff about permitting and stuff like that. And so we knew we were we were in violation of some things, but other things we weren't. We could, there was a fine line. We were trying to, not go right to jail, but try and, find. And big crowd started, and then the cops came later. By now it's like 9 o'clock in the morning or something. And but I was clean cutting a couple of the other guys with me. One of the guys with me had been an intelligence officer in the Army, and had been involved with the tiger cages and things. I don't know if you remember about those. Those are little bamboo cages they used to put the prisoners in, and it was almost like torture. Where they, for intelligence, they leave them in there a few days, and they'd start talking after a while, because you're so cramped up and that kind of stuff. But anyway, because our government had denied using that kind of stuff, and in reality we did a lot of stuff, but that's war. I mean, that's the one thing. It's terrible. That's why you don't want to have war, because when you think about it, if you have people that you really love or care about, and you see somebody do something horrible to them, what happens? Natural instinct. You want to. A lot of people, not everybody, but you're almost going to want to go do the same thing to them, and that sort of mentality happens, And I've seen it quite often that people weren't that thing, but then all of a sudden they saw their friend's legs get blown off or arms, and all of a sudden now it's, now I mean business, and every one of them is going to get worse than that type of thing. And so anyway, he, was very, very clean cut. He'd been an officer in that. And so we talked to the cops and that, and we convinced them they let us stay. They figured, and well, they're calling their head, whoever they call, and I think what the bottom line was that arresting us would have made it look a lot worse for them. And, and we weren't causing any problems. We were not, and we were just, and we said we were Vietnam veterans and we were here to stop the domino theory that was coming, around the world. And here it was right in Cuba, and it was going to come right across the Fort Lauderdale Beach. And so we were here to protect it, and we'd been in Vietnam, and we knew what war was about. And we didn't really get onto any atrocities about Vietnam or that, but we got recognition and stuff. And so that was part of the thing. At some point then, along the way, Scott heard about, it was in the newspaper and stuff. And then I ran into a guy, Jim Hale, which was out at Homestead, that was a VVAW guy. And he had been to the Paris Peace Talks as one of the representatives. And so as far as Homestead, it was far from where I lived, but as I go down there, and he drove up to me, and we started, and then he knew Scott well, and Alton Foss, then we met. And Alton was like working in Dade County, but when I first met Alton, I thought this guy, and I liked Alton, but he had so much baggage. He had so many problems. And I thought, what is he doing? And it was one of the kind of things that was bad for the anybody that was willing to help and volunteer, you took them and you used them however you could. And, you didn't get the best people for the job or whatever. And, Alton was a good, important person. Had a leg injury. He had been a corpsman which is a Navy guy, but he had been in the Marine Corps. Corpsmen get assigned as like the medics, but they're called corpsmen in the Marine Corps. And he had gotten shot in the leg. And, he really had complications of that, and then he got drug addicted to it, and just all sorts of complication stuff. But he was also the kind of guy that just had a lot of issues, and so just that made things 10 times worse than they were. And so I got involved with him, and then I get through Scott, and that's how I got in all this stuff. And
wow,
ended up meetings here in Gainesville and. But the other thing that was a flip side to this that I don't always get to tell people, that was really a learning tool. I sort of expected it to come. I had been warned, but I had gotten a pretty good job with the union. And one of the things the military, they had sent me to school to learn underwater diving. They paid for it to go to underwater diving and work and salvage in it. And so I got a job with the Marine Construction Company, and the first real paying job, really good money. And I was like, wow. And, but I'd worked there a few months, but once they found out I was involved in all the anti-war stuff, and I asked him why, my boss. He says, listen, the unions won't allow us to hire you. You're persona non grata as far as the union concerns. You'll never get a job in this field anyway. That's what they have any say about it. And it was a reality. I sort of knew those kind of things happen, but it was, it was hurtful in a couple of different ways. It was the first time I thought I was trying to get a job to make decent money and do, whatever, and do stuff. And it wasn't anything wrong, and then, just because of my beliefs, and I never brought anything at work, I never told them, nobody at work even knew, it just, when I started getting in the newspaper, and even before Gainesville Eight, local paper, stuff and that. And once they found out about that, it was just, get rid of him.
Wow.
And I ran into other things like that, and then after the Gainesvilles, it got really bad, just before it and stuff like that. And even not even directly, but like what happened to Scott, not to the degree he did. Nobody shot me or anything, but there was, and we met some of the Watergate burglars down. We didn't know it. At the time they said they were somebody else, and I realized there was just a lot of not good people around and doing a lot of stuff and that. But it didn't surprise me. I grew up in a bad, I didn't grow up like a lot of kids. I grew up more like the kids in the ghetto goes up, so that I knew that, things are hard and tough, and you just, you learn how to handle them and deal with them. And so, and that's how I ended up here, I guess.
Wow. I have a quick question, or a couple questions.
Yes.
you talk a little bit about how you were realizing that, kind of what you had been told about the war was different than, how the war was actually going on.
Yeah.
And when you kind of returned home, what made you want to be active against the war? Was there like a certain maybe event or what helped you decide to say, oh, you know what,
Oh, okay. That's an
an
excellent question. And my best answer is I watched television. And what I watched and saw a lot was Nixon and people like that. And I heard the stuff they were saying and the different things. And I knew and it wasn't the same thing that I knew had happened. There was even bigger. And then when I talked to my other friends in the military, because, I know when I was in an isolated area, so I didn't know the whole picture, but I started talking to, the more vets I talked to them, different things, and really had conversations. And I was at that period of my life where I probably still am a talker, but, you first into college, you talk a lot, and you do stuff, and get learning and that. And so we were sharing, and they were sharing a lot of information and stuff. And I said, and of course, then I was reading a lot. And then when the Paris peace talks were going on, I was trying to follow that and all that stuff. And it just made me more, I said, I went over there not to, because it was politics or I was helping the puppet government of South Vietnam. I was under the impression that these horrible communists from up were killing and doing all these things to the people. And I realized, Cali happened back about then too, in that period of time. I said, I don't know what's worse, us or them. And I saw what our firepower could do and stuff. I saw, some of the bombing raids and, they weren't close, but we were out in the field. And I was like, holy shit, I'm glad we're not the bad guys. And I was surprised they were still around and doing it, and to think what, I was like very impressed with them. I remember the first time I saw a North Vietnamese person, had been captured. And, I always thought they were like these little, people that were, I don't know, I just, we've been talking their gooks or this, and I thought, this is not, and this guy was big, strong, well-fit, looked very professional, military, and it wasn't at all what I had pictured. It was like, wow. And I go, well, what's the deal with him? And they go, well, he's a Chu Hoi now. And he was at NBA that had deserted to come over and, and they were using him for whatever, interpretate, I don't know, whatever. But this was like different from all those kind of things. And you start putting everything together and reading and stuff. And, I just, the more I learned, the more, and talking to, and I was concerned about religion. I remember when I was in Vietnam for Christmas, and they had a mass, and I went to it. It was non-denominational, but I remember afterwards, and there was a chaplain, and I think it was a priest or whatever, but anyway, and they were, saying a prayer for the guys out in the field and all this kind of stuff. And I remember asking, I said, well, what about the enemy? He says, what do you mean? I said, they have all the God, Buddha, I don't know, whatever, they have different things. And, one of the things that I did when I was overseas, I didn't have any books with me, other than when I got the correspondent course, they sent me a couple books, but I had a Bible with me. So somebody had given me a Bible. I think when we were flying over, if you wanted one, they give you a Bible, type of thing, take it with you. And I read it all from front to cover, I did not because it was so much religion. It was just, it was a famous book. I should read it. And it was, stories. And that's what I look at today. It really, and I hope I'm not an atheist. I still consider myself a Catholic, but not a practicing Catholic. I'm really sort of like disillusioned with organized religion. And, Catholic, a good example, is just with all the pedophilia and other crap that they had, but I read histories about, the Catholic from way back, when they were in the early stage, when they were first forming. And I mean, it's not pretty. And, the other day I saw the what do you call it? When they were having the debate, the Republican debate, and Haley is from South Carolina, I believe, and she got and right away, of Jesus Christ, this and then and I mean that's fine to have a religious belief, but she was saying if I get elected, I will follow everything they did, in the Bible and all, or something to that effect. And I'm like, well, you'll never get my vote because there's a lot of stuff that's not right in there, and I have a real issue with that.
Yeah.
But I feel everybody has a right to their own belief as long as they don't hurt somebody else with it.
That's right.
And one of the problems that I see with religion is it's used to hurt a lot of people lots of times. But anyway, I asked this priest, I said, what about the other, so he gets in a discussion, we're all there. And he says, well, he says, they have their gods and that, and they believe to them. And I said, well, which God, if we're going to protect us in battle, who protects them in battle? And the only thing I remember he told me, which actually sort of made sense, he says, if you put yourself in a situation where it's really dangerous, God can't protect you. And at least that made sense to me because, I said, you mean like if you stand up out of the foxhole and there's bullets flying around, you probably get hit and get killed. And he says, you're right. And he says, but you'll go to heaven, and that kind of stuff. I go, well, I don't know if I want to go to heaven. But it was like, and he said, so they're over on one side praying to one God and this other, which is right. And it just seemed very hypocritical to me. It seemed like the more I learned stuff, the more I question things, or the stupider. It's like nowadays. I mean, at one time, I probably naively thought I was sort of smart, and, a few things. And now I feel like I'm dumber than ever sometimes. And, the more things you get into and you talk to people, it's just like, God, there's so much I need to learn. Anyway, I feel like I'm rattling on forever. But real quick to wrap it up, after I got done, I got different jobs, kept trying to get better, kept going to school. The whole time I was going to school, and worked my way up different jobs. I worked with the state and different things. I worked with the county, I worked as a tool and die apprentice for a while. And then a friend of mine, two guys that run a dive boat I ran. I got a captain's license so I could run a dive boat. And this is in a very short period of time. And people say to me, they think I'd be bullshitting. I'm telling them all this stuff I'm doing. They go, how old are you? I said, what do you mean? I said, when you're out all partying and doing all this kind of, I'm just doing different. I usually had 3 jobs at any one time in my life, except when I got all this stuff. And I said, I'm making the most of it. I live life, but in a different way. Not partying that, but I'm doing stuff. And anyway, these 2 guys, they said, well, we're at the fire department. This is a great job. And he said, do you ever watch TV? I love watch TV, but I don't get to watch it that much because I'm busy. So you ever watch Squad 51? And Emergency. And I said, oh, yeah, I love that show. And they go, well, it's just like that. And I go, oh, really? And they go, yeah, you should come work for the fire department. And I'd and so then like a week or so ago, I run into one of them later, and he says, did you go about the fire? I said, nah, I'm still thinking. He says, well, they're giving a test at City Hall, coming up in next week or something. You should go over there. And so I went home and I said, you know what? I'm going to go see about it. I went there in the application. I said, can I get an application and all this, at City Hall? And they said, yeah. And it's on such and such a date. And I figured, and they said, it's a good thing you signed up. There's quite a few people signed up. Well, I didn't think to ask them how many, And so I get there about 15 minutes early before it's starting at the test. And there was like there's people all over the place. I'm going, and there was, but it was like over 300 people there for the test.
Wow.
I'm going, holy. And I said, well, how many people are they hiring? And they said 5. And I thought, I know nothing about the fire department, but I said, you know what? I go in and take the test. And I think I got the top score. And anyway, long story short, I got hired. And, and then a year later, I'm an actual full fireman for all this. But I went really quick up in the fire service because prior to that, because I diving and did a lot of stuff and that, I had taken first aid courses, I took an EMT class, all before I ever went in the fire department. So I had a lot of things that they wanted back then, and they were just starting a lot of that stuff. So it helped me move up even in the fire department sooner. And when they first interviewed me for the job, they said, what's your goal to be in the fire department? I said, well, I don't know. I said, what do you have here? And they said, well, you can do anything you want. I said, well, I guess I want to be the fire chief. And I said, I know I can't be a gun sergeant, but that's what I'm going to be and I didn't make that. I got to one below, in that, but that's where I went for 30 years. But in those 30 years, I did a lot of other things. I ran a part-time company, educational training for hazardous material and waste and stuff like that. After a while, I taught at the community college I first started teaching in the EMS program because I had been a paramedic and all that kind of stuff. So I taught a couple years there. Then I taught at the police academy, and then I got into the fire science program, and I taught, actually, I think it was 20 some odd years there in the, I worked at the fire department, but at night, so when I wasn't at the fire department, I'd teach their classes and that. And also when they went to online stuff, I had a couple online courses I used to do with people, and they sent me to school to learn how to, do that, set up a program online and all that kind of garbage, and which you guys are probably experts at. And so I learned that, and I did that till even after I retired from the fire department. I did that for about probably 10 more years. And then what happened was they just said that they weren't making enough money on the degree program, and they told me, you got like 2 more semesters or something, and we're going to cut the program out. And I said, okay. And in a way, I didn't care, but I liked it. And that was, a job. I was in retirement now, sort of. And then at the last minute, they said, well, we've got another program in emergency management. We'd like you to do that class because we have people that still need to finish a couple more semesters. So I stayed there and did that for a little bit. But at the same time I was doing that, when I retired from the fire department, I knew I needed to work some still. I just wasn't ready to. So I went to work for the county for the emergency manager. I was an emergency manager for the county. But I had also, when I was with the city in the fire department, I had 2 other jobs besides that in the fire department. And one of them was I was the emergency manager for the city also. And so I had, like I said, 3 hats. I'd tell other people on that, and
Wow.
which is. But I could do that because I was, when I first went, I was in the union, and I still am in the union technically. I pay a yearly fee, but when I got so far, I became in the state of Florida. If you get up into management executive, you can't be an actual voting member of the union. You can belong to the union and pay money and dues, which is what I do, but you can't actually participate in any of the things in that, and other than social things. And but I just believe in it. I support their thing. I mean, there's a lot of things in the union over the years, and especially when I was in supervisors and stuff and management. I mean, they would help people that should have been fired in a minute that were terrible. I mean, we had people that were drug addicts, should have gotten rid of them, and they'd protect them just because they were a union member and stuff, and it just drove me crazy, But anyway, so I did that. Then when I left that, I also went to the school, or Broward School Board, in the safety department, and worked with their emergency part where they, I helped inspect schools and that, but we were looking at, especially when on the West Coast, when they had all those schools destroyed by the hurricane, I helped them set up a emergency response plan for all that. And that was one of my keys, because also I belong to with the CERC, State Emergency Response Commission. I wasn't on the commission, I was a task force. I was the chairman of the training task force, and for quite a few years, I don't remember, at least 10 years, I guess it was. And so I did a lot of different things. I do that. And then I work for the Board of Rules and Appeals. Are you familiar with them?
I believe so.
They're the ones that issue permits or oversee all that process. Gotcha. And building and stuff like that. And, South Florida is notorious for, and so I thought it was a good thing. And now I actually work on contract with them. I do testing for them, for inspectors and stuff like that. And we like to think in Broward County we have the highest standard of the whole state, because at one time we had our own code in Broward County, fire code and that, and building code, separate from the whole state, and it was like the model. And but several years back, and it's probably 25 years now, the states, people get all this in Broward, and then they moved to somewhere else, Dade County, and they said, oh, well, you didn't have to do that, then they Dade, but you make us do all this sort of stuff, it's costs us money, or you won't let us do this. So they wanted to get a uniform code through all the state, which they're still working. They haven't got to that point finally. There is one in there, but everybody has the same one in the state now, basically, except each county can have amendments to it for particular things. So, and like not every county has a big airport. Not every county, we have the largest oil refinery port on the East Coast of the United States. So we have special needs that they don't have in other places, even compared to Tampa and that, so. So I just was involved in all that, and plus, before I graduate, I'm not graduate, retired from the fire. As I was still working, I'd go to school too. So, and I managed to graduate there. So
Wow.
that stuff. And it was funny because when I went to get my master's, I was going to go in one area, but I said, as having worked in the fire and government, now what really do they need to? It was like it seemed one of the least things that we were good at was saving money or handling money. We weren't that good at it. It just, I wasn't. And there was things I saved the money. I thought, well, I'm not good at it, but I'm saying we got a problem here.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a master's in an MBA, but with an emphasis on finance, and I thought that would help me. It was funny though, after I got it, when I had applied for some other jobs for different things for other part, they said, you should have really got a political science because been much better for you than a degree in business finance. I'm like, okay, whatever you think. And you go to all these government, they're all having all these financial problems and begging money. I'm thinking, okay. Anyway, that's where I am today now, I guess. I still do a little part-time stuff with the Border Rules and Appeal. Like I said, I do testing for them and that, and I hope I don't get myself in trouble. And I do other things with, volunteer organizations and stuff and that.
Wow, that's amazing. I have only a couple more questions.
Yes,
this has been really awesome. It's been so great to hear your incredible story. So I want to ask about how you touched a little bit on it before, about kind of how, kind of what do you see connections to with your activism, kind of anti-war activism, anti-establishment activism to today? Do you see like any parallels?
I do, and I'll tell you funny. It's sort of embarrassing, but I'm going to tell you. I actually voted for Trump initially the first time. I wasn't following things as closely as I should have. You got busy, a lot of busy, and I was retired, so I didn't spend as much time with things as I should have. And there was this new guy, Trump, that I didn't know much about, but they said he's a great businessman, makes all the money, and I knew our country was having financial problems. And I said, we need to change, but, I don't believe in socialism, total. There's some things from socialism good, like most things. You take the good stuff, don't take, whatever. But, I wasn't a Bernie because of that. I didn't want to be a socialist society and that. And, I'm not anything against it personally. If the person was a socialist, I don't care that. But I don't think I think we're much better as a democratic democracy as we are, as much as we can, we're supposed to be. And I always, when I got interested in that, I read the Declaration of Independence. I did all those abilities. I tried to really educate, because through high school, I don't know. They probably had it, but I didn't learn it. I didn't get it. All I was trying to figure out how to get out of school, not to learn more. And I really admire some of the kids that go through and really do well and learn a lot. And I remember meeting some young people not too long, but it was sort of sad. I'm going to go off just for a second. When I was teaching in the fire science program, I had to bring different students in, and some of them they'd identify if they needed help in that. And I was so shocked with some of the caliber of lack of good education that they'd received from the high schools. And I looked at, high schools, and I said, I worked for the school board, and there's 265 schools or something in there, and I would go to every school. And, and this wasn't my job, but I just tried to find out, how many were passing, graduating that. And, people think everybody's passing. And I was just shocked when I learned how many people don't graduate, and how many people fail, and it's disturbing, or they get through and they can't even read. And what happened is, because I was the only one, I guess, that was stupid enough to, but in my programs, and they'd send me people that had problems. And so you talk to them and try to find, and I found out some, they could barely read and write, and I'm no great grammar, or grammatic or knowledge, but I managed to get through everything. But I know that it's important to know all that stuff, and I also know that you have to read and be able to understand, and and things. And And I just saw such a deficit in these students and that, and talking to them. And I remember going through high school. You know, I hear now, well, they have all these counselors that talk. I never had one time in my whole time in high school did anybody ever take me in and like talk to me and say, you know, why are you doing so bad? What's going on in that? What the only place that I went to was the principal's office to get punished. And I just, you know, so there's a problem, and it's still, I think it's still ongoing, if not worse. I mean, I don't know if it's any worse or not, or if it's, you know, but there's problems out there. We still, the greatest country that we are, and I do believe that. I mean, you know, even after you come back from Vietnam, that was one thing you know, America's, you see the stuff in that there, and, you know, and I've been to a lot of other countries, Nepal and different, you know, a lot of different countries around the world and different things. And when I go, and I'm with my wife, when she passed away now, but a couple of years ago, but, you know, I always want to go to the places that aren't really where everybody goes to tourism. Like when we went to Africa, I went to Soweto, you know, and I mean, how can, you know, what's wrong with this country, not our country, the world, that they let people in those kind of situations, you know, and perpetuate it. You know, it's one thing if somebody's in a situation, well, work and help to get them out, you know. And that's why I'm not a big proponent on welfare. I mean, there needs to be a welfare and change. I mean, some people just can't support themselves, and you need to care for those people. But at the same time, you know, you don't want to make a welfare nation. I don't know. And I mean, it's probably going to come across wrong because politicians use that to say, but I mean, you know, and you need to educate people. That's how you get out of things. I mean, education really helped me. I mean, when I started getting better jobs, is because I kept getting more and people. You know, I have my resume, you know, you look at it and they go, wow. You know, and a couple of times when I went for things, people said, well, you couldn't have done all that. I said, well, you check on everything. I said, there's no, I didn't fabricate or lie about anything. Everything's legit there. And I just, you know, but I put a lot of effort. And it made, and, you know, and over time it made a difference.
Right.
And, you know, it's like saving. If you save enough little time, you know, at first it doesn't, but, you know, ultimately you'll probably see a return on that. And so it's that kind of thing. And I just put all those things together, and it got me so upset. And you know, I mean, the person that I don't know if I personally hated him, but Nixon so upset me so much in his cabinet and the people that I see and listen to do, you know, I just hated him. And what really, to this day, I am so upset not still upset. I mean, I was so upset at the time when they gave him a full presidential funeral. I mean, the guy didn't deserve, he deserved a cardboard box, as far as I'm concerned. He was a disgrace to our country. He harmed so many people, probably killed a bunch of people. You know, I don't know all what he did. I mean, probably none of us will ever know totally what he was ultimately responsible for. But it was a lot of bad stuff. And, you know, to me, and I go to a lot of military funerals, different things. Those are where you honor people. And it's just like Kyle and I, that's my partner, she lives with me now. My wife's passed away. I mean, I didn't know her before my wife got that. I mean, it didn't come across right. But anyway, really nice person. But, you know, she came to a recent funeral with me, to some of the guys that I work with, and you know, I always go because it's a way to honor them. They're not so much them, but their family. And his wife, and I knew him for years, and she was so happy and talk, you know, and I was talking to her at the funeral and stuff. And I could tell it made her feel really good that we were there, and, you know, and stuff. And that's the thing you do. And I think that's a part of the good things you want in life. There's things that you do that are, you know, sort of ceremonial and that good. But honoring a guy like Nixon, you know, by a burial, a presidential burial, that was upsetting to me. Did I answer your question? I got so totally off, I probably didn't.
Well, it's all right. I'll ask it just one more time.
Okay.
Folks are asking for you downstairs, so I just want to let you know.
I'm done in a minute.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm answering the question now.
Last question. What would you say to, I guess, people who want to be, I guess, amplify their voice now, who want to become like active now?
Oh, well, first of all, you need to have a thirst for learning and understanding, know what's going on as much as you can. It's just, you know, there's limits to everything. And don't ever think that your voice doesn't count. Every voice, and that doesn't necessarily mean mad screaming, carrying on, but getting out and talking and being willing to discuss with people And if it means confronting somebody about something and talking, you know, I mean, don't get yourself hurt. You don't have to attack people. You don't have to get in a fight with them. But, you know, some of the best thing I've had is take people off guard, you know, really nice, friendly, and they say something and make them look stupid as crap, you know, and not a nice thing to do, but it would work for me in many cases in the past with that type of thing, situation and that. So I would, you know, it's like people say, oh, my vote count. Every vote does count. It's our system still like that. The only reason it's going the other way is if we let it. And you know, and it's scary to me what's happening out there, some of the stuff, but I still always think positive. And I try to tell people, most of the people in the world, at least in the United States, I believe are good people. And I can't say the world, because sometimes I've been in areas of the world where people are so indoctrinated with their beliefs and cultures that it is dangerous. I mean, not only for other people, but for them too. And they got a lot harder road to pull up the, you know, the bootstrings or whatever, or bootstraps or whatever, than we do. And, you know, we got that stuff. We just have to keep it and keep tweaking it to get it where we ultimately wanted it to be in that. And so they need to work at it. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope so.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, you're welcome. I gave you too much time, but thank you. I mean, I know you could have as much time. I mean, I took too much of your time.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah.